It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like, how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is The Prosecutor's Legal Blues.
Let me ask you this, Bob. You've said that the defense is going to lean into that. Why? I mean, to me, that sounds like the kind of drug that could turn somebody into a person who went from a great family man to somebody who's willing to kill their son and their wife just to somehow get the money for the next hit. So I'm kind of confused about why that's a good argument.
I'm guessing because of capability or the incapability of like the bungling of everything, because he's constantly high is what I would guess.
I will say this much. And this will be controversial. We've done a lot of cartel prosecutions, right? Like drug trafficking, where it's like moving international levels of, cocaine and heroin. I do not think that money went to drugs alone. He may have had an opioid addiction. Who knows? I don't know.
Couldn't have, right? 50 grand
There's literally no way.
No way.
There's no way that money.
He'd be dead.
Gold-plated Oxycontin.
Yeah, literally no way. All that money was only for drugs, and I don't necessarily. But you know what costs a lot of money? Blackmail. And so it's possible that the money went towards blackmail that had to do with the drugs. But in other words, I'm not saying he didn't have an opioid addiction, but it is no way a situation where this man is high out of his mind all the time.
50 grand a week.
No way, right? I mean, you and I know that. We know how much heroin that is.
Impossible.
It's impossible. But blackmail costs a lot of money, especially when you're a man of his stature, and it's a small town, it's a small place, and it's possible he got high here and there. That I buy, rather than this man who is reaching for his next high, because unfortunately, probably, Bob, you and I know what people who are very addicted to heroin look like. He does not look like that to me. Everyone looks different on addiction, so that's why I'm not delving into that, because I don't think it's important. The whole point is there's no way, doesn't matter how high his addiction is, that he was spending all that money just on the actual hit to get high.
Right.
But
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. So it's a sympathy thing. But he also hasn't raised any sort of insanity defense or any sort of competency issue.
No, there's
nothing. You can't spring that. That's something you have to establish before trial. And so they can't bring it in now. He's been, under watch. There's no way he's been able to keep up with this addiction in the past 2 years because of what he's been under in terms of the watch by the court, by his attorneys. Sure. And you don't drop an addiction like that overnight. You quite literally, what's it called? Dope sick? Physically 100%. Get sick.
Yeah.
We haven't 100%. Seen that, right? We've heard of rehab. And so I know you may not disagree with that, but I'm saying that for all the people in the chat, because it's I also think that's a red herring. I do not think this is a man who is wildly addicted to opioids to the tune of $50,000.
And I want to keep going down this rabbit hole that Alice is digging, because ordinarily Alice and I are the least conspiratorial people ever. I mean, we're always throwing cold water on conspiracies. I think he's guilty. I would vote for him to be guilty if I was a juror. But I will say this, it would not shock me if there is some much bigger thing going on here that we don't know and we're never going to know. And the $50,000 a week thing, like Alice said, that's not really going to drugs. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but
sorry, but that's sex ring level keep this under wraps, international planes
Yeah,
flying
it's like
around.
Jeffrey Epstein. Like I was on
That's what it
Epstein
sounds like, right?
Island, and you got to keep that on the down low for me. And
But I'm
yeah,
actually serious, right?
no,
That's the level of money.
I was thinking gambling potentially. Gambling could definitely be something where if he was involved in that. But I mean, look, and they're not going to be able to use any kind of opioid thing as a kind of a mental defect, or it's not going to really be able to mitigate the damages in terms of, but if it is a thing where the guy was like that kind of an addict in terms of being able to function normally, in terms of being able to kind of pull off a thing where you're killing two people kind of simultaneously, to me, the biggest piece of evidence was the fact that he admitted to touching Paul's phone. To me, that was an absolute smoking gun. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out anything that the defense is going to be able to say why he was touching his phone other than to go on to try to delete that video. To me, that is incredibly damning. It's more, I saw somebody on here saying they're not impressed with me because of the timeline. Whatever, man. You'll know what's up when when the defense gets up there and tears the timeline apart. Yeah, I mean, look, there's certain amounts of speculation that have to take place in order for us to say, okay, this is when the phones went black. This is the timeline. That's when they died instead of 9:06 when he leaves. I mean, because we're not talking like hours. We're talking like minutes from when like he wakes up from his nap allegedly and leaves. So, I mean, the defense is going to attack it. You have to know coming in, they're going to attack the timeline. I mean, that's going to be one of their big things, so, but that thing where he goes and for whatever reason with his son, and they made a big deal, like Harpootlian, like an opening talking about how his son's brain was blown out of his head. It was like, they were shocking. They were trying to front the shock and awe campaign that they foresaw coming. So Harpootlian like goes in opening and just says it on repeat, which is like horrific, to even think of that, especially in terms of, and they're doing it for the reasons like, would a father ever do that to his son? How could a man do that to his own flesh and blood? Somebody he loved more than himself, all that kind of argument. But that phone, like picking up the phone while his son's brain is sitting right there in front of him. And like, I got on there to do something. I don't know what it was, but we know now that the phone was dead. So he couldn't achieve what he was trying to achieve, because he had to have known that Paul was recording at that time. He had to have like Paul was on his phone all the time, taking, videos and snaps. So, I mean, it's kind of the nature of kids that age. So to me, that was a really like low key devastating piece of evidence that I think is going to stick with the jury. Like there's just no explanation of why he would have picked that phone up other than to try to destroy evidence, which you and I know with Cellubrite, you're not destroying anything. They plug the phone under the Cellubrite. Everything that you've deleted comes, I think it's like 98% is recovered. So it's like, but you would think that he would know that as a lawyer, but I don't know, man.
Look, he did a lot of smart things, right? I mean, going to get the shotgun to protect himself helps explain why he has gunshot residue. Touching the bodies helps explain why there's, blood on the steering wheel or whatever, or blood on him. I mean, he was pretty good about giving a reason for a lot of the things that happened. And maybe, look, as we've said before, when you actually kill somebody, a lot of times, not that we've killed people before, but when you kill somebody, it's a lot worse than thinking about it. And even the hardest criminal may make mistakes because of the adrenaline and everything else. And you could imagine he reaches down and picks up that phone and then realizes immediately, oh God, I made a huge mistake. I should never have done that. And then the whole drive to his mom's house, he's trying to think, what am I going to say to explain why I touched the phone? You could sort of imagine that kind of thing going on, but he certainly like talking about how they did some target shooting when they drove around. Oh, just a few things. Once again, explains sort of why some of the gunshot residue. So he clearly, if he did it, was thinking through some of the things he would need to be able to explain beforehand. And the video is really interesting. Did he know about the video? Did he not know about the video? There are multiple videos. Remember, there's also, they were trying to do the video call with the dog at one point, and that didn't work out. So, who knows exactly why he would have done that. It also seems like if he did it, he also picked up Maggie's phone because there's that moment where the phone tries to recognize a face, which, is so evocative to me because I'm kind of surprised that's not recorded. I'm kind of surprised that 1 second when it's trying to record the phone isn't in the Apple memory somewhere of what
Right.
image it was looking at. I mean, wouldn't it
Right
be
in the
great if we
cloud.
had that image? But we don't.
Yeah, exactly. So I see people in the chat. Is that a fact that they're saying that Paul's phone didn't die until 10:36? Is that right?
I think it's when it stopped. There is a period of time before it dies where there is an abrupt stopping of any sort of action on his phone.
I thought that I had seen that there was at 8:46 that he was at like 2%. Like I thought that I had either saw that or it was testified to, but I think there's multiple people saying that his phone did, because Maggie's phone was not dead when they recovered it from the side of the road, right? It was still.
His phone dies at 10:34. Have my
So, yeah,
handy
that's what
dandy
people are saying.
timeline here. But I mean, I think the reason you're seeing that is because up until that point he was using his phone continuously. Then all of a sudden he stops using it continuously, so it actually manages to survive for another 30 minutes or so because he's dead during that whole time.
Or an hour and a half. Like if it goes from 9,
Right.
like yeah, so whatever. If the time of death is estimated to be 8:48, 8:49, 8:50, somewhere in there, because he's back in the car on the road by 9:06, right? That's when he's leaving to his mom's. So yeah, I don't know. I think ultimately it's going to end up being, like I tried the Garcia case in Omaha, and it was all circumstantial. It was kind of the same thing. They had they had less physical forensic evidence than they do in this case, and they convicted Garcia, and they had zero forensic. It was all circumstantial, and a lot of it was mere presence in terms of him being there, having the opportunity to do it, and they built kind of this revenge motive, even though it spanned 13 years. So, I mean, you never know what a jury's going to do. Obviously we got to see what the defense is going to put out there. But, at this point, I just don't know how the flow went for the jurors. It's like I'm always trying to listen to what the talking heads are saying about, like, are the jurors responsive? How did the jurors respond to this particular, thing that was said, or this particular piece of evidence? So, I mean, it'll be curious. I mean, that's just one thing you never, ever can predict is what is a jury going to do ever? Just can't do it.
We call it the black box all the time. And that's why we always say, if you're incredibly guilty, you go to trial, because like it's your best shot.
Right.
All you have to do is pick off one person, whereas
Exactly.
the judge is going to probably be harder to pick off than a jury of your peers.
Let me ask you this, Bob. So we've talked about the lie, the fact that he says he was asleep on the couch and he was actually down at the kennels. Do you think he needs to testify to explain that?
Oh man. It's like, I just cannot see how that guy can help himself on the stand. It's as much as I feel like he needs to. I just don't. And look, it's 100% his decision. It's not his lawyer's decision. It's no one that, like, it's 100% his decision whether or not he's going to testify. Obviously, his attorneys will advise him what they think is the best bet. But I mean, what can he say that helps himself? Like, because I've always thought, like, oh man, if I was ever accused of a crime that I didn't commit, I would get on the stand. There's no way that they wouldn't hear from me on the stand, but after practicing for 20 years, the jury misconstrues one thing that you say and then they hate you, you're done. I mean, it's like Alice said, it's like, there's a couple of things that the juries hang their hats on. It's whatever story they believe and whether or not they hate the defendant. If they hate the defendant, that can overcome a mediocre story if they hate the defendant, and I mean, he is imminently hateable because of everything that's come out. I mean, the guy was stealing his clients' money to the tunes of millions. There's the alleged killing of his wife and his son. There's it's all coming out, it's like, there's just so much prior bad acts out there for them to like hang their hat on. I don't think you could put him on. I honestly do. I don't see how he helps in any way, shape, or form.
So what do you say, defense counsel, because you're so right, it is his call, and what would you say to him to keep him off the stand? Let's see how good of a persuasive attorney you are.
I would tell him quite simply that, I'd say, well, Alec, what do you think that you're going to be able to say that's going to help you? And I'll give you my answer on what I think you should do after that. And then I'd hear him out and I'd tell him that that's not going to help you. I mean, like there's nothing that you're going to say that is going to sway them towards making you a likable person. Like that ship has sailed. There's no putting that toothpaste back in the tube. It's over. Like I'm convincing him that there's absolutely nothing that he can say or do on the stand that is going to help repair the damage that's been done. I mean, like all he can do is hurt himself. That's the bottom line. He's not going to have the answers for some of the questions, especially if Brett says, if he's the guy, it's impossible to lie your way out of that. It's real simple when you're telling the truth because you don't have to remember anything because you're telling the truth. It's a whole different story when you're lying because you got to remember a lot, So in terms of keeping him off the stand, I think that they're going to absolutely have to try to talk him out of it but he's going to have that smartest guy in the room thing going on.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat said he's exactly the kind of person who would testify. And I agree 100%.
Every one of my defendants who's ever testified fits the bill that is Alec. I mean, he thinks he's larger than life. He thinks he can talk himself out of everything. I mean, you can see that in those body cams with those first interviews. Everything he's saying is like asinine, but he is like, man, I am killing it with these cops, right? I mean, you see it on his face. He thinks he's killing it. And
when he tells the story about how one of his workers is a secret FBI assassin or whatever in the first interview, and it's like,
he doesn't even laugh.
What in the world? That's it. Yeah.
So the crying. No, even the greatest actors known to mankind or humankind cannot cry like that. So is it regret or is it, oh my God, I'm done? What is the impetus of his crying? Because he's like,
look, you can kill your son and still be like, what did I do? I mean, I don't doubt that he loved his son. I also don't doubt that he killed his son. And so I think he can absolutely cry that way for a whole lot of reasons. And I think it's all a mixed bag, right? You are sitting in trial fighting for your life, not literally because death penalty is not on the table, but you can still look at pictures and imagine your son's brains blown out and been the one to do it and still be like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this goes to something we talk about all the time, which is even the people who do the absolute worst thing in the world are not actually monsters. They're human beings who did a monstrous thing. And he may have done this horrible thing and still regret it. Even if he would do it again, he might still regret it and still have that sort of emotional side where, well, I did what I had to do, but it's still really sad. So, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people try and just portray people who are accused of these horrendous crimes as if they're just emotionless, psychopathic monsters. And sometimes they are. I mean, I'm not saying that's never true. But, yeah, I mean, I think those tears could be legitimate. And having to relive what he did, I'm sure is pretty bad. And to the extent that he lets it happen because he knows allowing those emotions to take over is valuable for him, I think it is. I think you've seen a lot of people on a lot of the same, programs that you're appearing on, Bob, who actually are affected by the fact he's crying so much, who think that is a sign that maybe he didn't do this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not buying it, but it certainly is something that I'm thinking about. Like, what is the impetus to it? Like, I keep reading people say you can't fake cry like that. Like it doesn't work like that.
I think it's real. I think those emotions are very real.
Like he's fake crying. I'm like, you don't fake cry constant for hours. It's like, it's like Brett says, I mean, look, there are definitely sociopaths that have absolutely no remorse and can sit there like a stone wall and like it wouldn't affect him. But I don't think he was that guy. I think that there was a long period of his life where he was probably a pretty decent guy until whatever happened. And I mean, kind of the only way that I can try to reconcile what this guy did to his family's legacy when they just ran that town for 100 years is the drugs. I mean, like, I can't think of any other thing that's rational. I mean, he blew up his entire family's legacy and like just exploded it. And it's not just him, it's like all of them. Like everything is tainted now. And it's like, what gets him there other than the drugs? I mean, because that oxy is a real thing, man. Like that is a poison that is unbelievable. And it does destroy lives like that, and it's like, I don't know. I'm curious to see how it's going to play out on the defense side of it. Because I could tell from the chat, we got about a 97% conviction rate here on the chat.
Really? I guess
Oh, yeah.
we have selective bias because I'm reading all the comments that say that they're with you, Bob. That
I think a lot of
they're
people
gonna
don't
be
buy the
hung.
motive. I mean, I think a lot of people don't buy the motive. And I think,
Yeah, but we, like you said, it's not an element of the crime.
but that
You know
doesn't
what
matter. I mean,
It's
as you know, if that jury goes back there and says, man, and you see this, I see this, it drives me crazy. I see it on Facebook. I see it on Twitter. I see people say things like, well, I'm 100% he's guilty, but I don't know that I could convict. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And I feel like you could have jurors go back and say, well, the evidence is really strong against him, but that motive, I just don't buy it. I guess if I don't buy the
Right.
motive, that's reasonable doubt. So I guess I have to, say he's not guilty. I could totally see people saying that.
Yeah, I know. What I was saying is that motive doesn't matter, it doesn't. It's like the factually, and the evidence that they're hearing, if they buy the timeline, if because it is circumstantial, obviously, and with a medical examiner, they're not going to be able to determine the exact time of death. I mean, look, this is going to be very much like OJ in the sense that the defense is going to spend a lot of time trashing the sled because they did butcher the crime scene. And that's part and parcel because he was Alec Murdaugh.
And you'll always
the fact
say
that they don't go in the house and get his, and search that house that night is it's incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible to me that they didn't go in and search the house. It's incomprehensible that they didn't go to his mother's house and search that property that night. You know what I mean? So it's like that is going to be hammered into the juror's head that they did an incompetent job of investigating, so everybody prepare themselves. They're going to be putting witness after witness on in terms of, and they tried to do it as much as possible in terms of cross-examination. Like you were saying, Alice, I mean, that's really where the defense starts their case is on cross, but they're going to put more on in terms of what should have been done. And they're going to leave the jury wondering why it wasn't done, So, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But
so you're betting hung jury at this point.
I just think that there's going to, because it's in that town and because of that family's legacy, that there's going to be at least one person that's a Murdaugh fan. If it was in a different county, not in the Low Country, then I think that they'd probably, based on just the prosecution's case at this point, would get a conviction. But in that county, man, I don't know. I was stunned that it was in that county. I guess I didn't really think of your point, from the defense side of it. He's thinking, well, maybe I want to, but he's screwed so many people in that county over out of their money. And it's a small town. Everybody probably knows somebody that he screwed over, probably closely, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars on some of these settlements, $2 million on one of them. I mean, the guy was really, really screwing a lot of people over, so they're going to lean into that hard. I thought they really wanted the financial stuff to come in because then it really gives them the ability to say, okay, well, look at how many people want to kill him. Look at how much money he stole from people. And money is typically the number one motive for killing somebody, aside from jealousy or, sexual relations or infidelity, things like that. You got money and sex. Those are the two reasons that people typically kill, So, I mean, they're certainly going to lean into the fact that, look, we've got a bunch of clients that had a fortune stolen from them. For people that have nothing, $100,000 is like they can live on it for a lifetime. And he stole that from them. The problem that they're going to have with that is proving that they had knowledge that it was stolen at the time. You know what I mean? In terms of them being like somebody who would actually be that upset that they would go and exact revenge on, because that was the Garcia case. Like the Garcia case, the first set of victims was the 11-year-old son of the pathology director at Creighton University. It wasn't the director himself. The revenge was taken on the son, like the boy. Like he didn't take it on the person who committed the wrong. He went to where he felt was a much more damning, like, now you've got to live with this with the rest of your life that your son's been murdered, So, I mean, that's the argument I think the defense is going to be making, certainly. I mean, maybe like Allison was saying, maybe maybe they're going to call Eddie themselves, except they'll never know what he'll testify to. He's like a wild cannon.
He's much more of a liability for anybody.
The ultimate, you never know what the answer to the question is going to be. Well, I'll just go ahead and I'll go on the record now and say I think he's guilty. I think he'll be convicted. I think he'll be convicted. I don't think it'll take long. I think it'll be a pretty
Right.
quick
Wait.
return.
Allison's saying that like she's been reading the chat. She says,
Uh-huh.
"What do you mean they want us to poll who? Who?
How do we poll them?
I don't think we
These,
can do
these
that.
guys both think he's guilty.
No, the people.
Oh, okay. Wait. Well, how do we
poll? Does
with the
someone know how to
people in
poll?
chat?
I don't know that that's
Okay.
possible.
Right. All right. So
Do we create one on Twitter? I mean,
Yeah. That's a good one.
Brett, do that. Create a poll.
Do that.
on
I'm
Twitter.
actually curious.
okay, I will create a
people would
poll
say.
on Twitter. So I was saying, while I'm doing that, I was saying that I think in the end, and this is obviously without the benefit of what I'm sure will be a brilliant job by the defense, that I do think he will be convicted, and I don't think it will be that close. So I guess Alice is up.
I hope so, except exactly what Brett said. And this is not to pick on anyone in the chat, but it blows my mind when people say, I know he's guilty, but I don't think the state's proven their case. I don't understand what that sentence means. And like, at least I've seen a dozen people say that in the chat, and that worries me. And that is kind of what we hear today more and more. Brett and I have had more kind of wild card juries that I'd like to admit to in the last kind of couple years. I don't know if it's the true crime world. I don't know if everyone thinks they know what beyond a reasonable doubt is, but doesn't really know. I think he is guilty, and I think the state's proven it. I'm worried about the black box jury.
Man, well, did you watch OJ?
In real time, I did
Alice
not.
wasn't
Not in real time.
alive when OJ.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
I was alive.
I'm a gentleman, so I wasn't going to ask you your age. But so, like, I watched that, from beginning to end. I think I was in college when OJ was going on. And that was one of those cases where in my heart, I knew he was guilty, but the state didn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And look, after the fact, we find out that was, it was like there was so much going on socially at that point. Like you had Rodney King happening and, like the cops all got acquitted and, there was riots happening. And like you had one of the jurors way after the fact admit that was payback. That verdict was payback for them not convicting any of the cops in the Rodney King beatings. But aside from that, I just don't know if they're proving it. But it's like I think there's some good evidence. I do, but it's like, are you gonna? Like, is that a death penalty state or not? I don't know.
Well, they declined to pursue the death penalty.
They didn't
Okay,
seek
so
which I think is actually smart of them.
it is smarter, like because it's like it's a much bigger weight on a juror knowing that your end decision is going to be he's going to die, he's going to be executed based on what you decide. I think it's a softer blow for a juror to think, okay, well, he's going to go to prison. I feel like even though I'm a little iffy on it, like I think that I feel because you're right, Alice. Like like in Illinois, we don't have a jury instruction for the definition of reasonable doubt. I mean, it's like it's different state to state because it's kind of like how the Supreme Court of the United States defined pornography. They're like, well, I can't really define it, but I know when I see it. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same thing with reasonable doubt. It doesn't have to be beyond all doubt. But it's like I always say it's like you got to get it to the goal line. You don't necessarily have to cross the goal line. Where a preponderance of the evidence is the 50. And beyond reasonable doubt is you're knocking on the door. You're on the goal line where you don't actually jump across it. So what's that cool little thing? Is that a link to the poll?
That is a link to the poll. And I've
So
also
smart.
starred a comment. I will say this. If the prosecution can't get a conviction this time around, then, maybe just let the feds go ahead and do their thing because they've gotten everything in. Like we've been talking about, doors been coming open that we didn't know if they were going to come open. This jury's going to know everything. This is not a jury. When you hear this sometimes where a jury, they find someone not guilty and later on they say, if only I had known about X, Y, or Z, I would have convicted. There's nothing like that here. They're going to know this is as favorable to the prosecution as it could possibly be.
I mean, they basically could have played Mandy Matney's entire Murdaugh, the Murdaugh Murders podcast, because basically everything that that was in there has been outed. Like you said, all the dirty laundry's out there. So yeah, I agree. Because I asked that question today when I was on the long crime thing. I'm like, yo. like if there is a hung, do you think they go after him again, or do you think they just let the feds pick it up? Because like you said, I mean, like what are they going to change? Like what, like
Yeah.
you
It
know what
doesn't
I'm
get
saying?
better than this, honestly, right? Like you can maybe pick a better jury, but that's a fool's errand.
Right,
But in terms of the
exactly.
rulings, this is fantastic. And one thing that I think is really important, I think Brett said it earlier, is people have said over and over, I just don't buy financial, motive for why he would kill his family. That's why we see people kill all the time for much smaller amounts, right? Whether it's a robbery at the gas station, whatever, but it's almost always for money, to be honest.
Almost
And
always.
it's almost always for money. And also, like, I mean, this guy, again, I don't think it's just about money, but the fact that it is money, if you extrapolate to all of our other cases, it's not these amounts, but it is always for money. And second, these kinds of criminals, I call him a white collar criminal because he's never been in trouble before. And he is, the definition of white collar in terms of power, prestige, money, all those things. They actually are some of our most vicious clients who will stop at no end because they have this God complex, right? And so the fact that he has committed these like 100, financial crimes puts him into the category of my most unpredictable defendants who I know will stop at nothing. And so he, in my mind, is absolutely capable of this and absolutely capable of doing it for money. I think it's more for who he is, his status.
And I just want something we say all the time, which is the motive shouldn't make sense to you. It's not like you hear the motive and you're like, oh yeah, I could totally see myself killing my kids because of that, right? That's not what it is. So if it's not believable to you because you can't imagine that convincing you to do something like it, that's not how you should think about this. You have to think about Alec Murdaugh, everything Alice said about him, his family, his legacy, everything Bob said about the fact that all this is going to bring down everything. Does the motive make sense for that person? And I think when you think about it that way, it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around something like this happening than if you try and put yourself in his shoes. Because hopefully the vast majority of you, if you put yourselves in his shoes, would say, well, I wouldn't do that. That would be my hope.
Yeah, and plus he, you have to consider he might not have been rationally thinking. If he's obviously he's not doing $50,000 worth of opioids a week, but if he's hitting oxy daily, the dude's not thinking like a normal person is. If it's been going on for 15, 20 years, I mean, that is a serious opioid addiction. I've like I said, I've seen the after effects. I've seen it in action, and it's devastating. Like I don't know how he was functioning at all, but in terms of him being able to rationalize why he's doing it, I don't think it necessarily has to make sense, because it may have made sense to him in his convoluted mind. You know what I'm saying? It's like it may not make sense to the rest of us in the real world as we're looking back on it, but him in the moment, it might have made perfect sense of just because where his brain was because of the drugs. I don't know. Like to me, like the biggest flaw in the motive was that it was the way that the AG decided that, like, okay, we're gonna try to like pinpoint the motive to like a very specific issue that he was trying to buy himself time. Like, I don't know why they said that. Like that, he's trying to buy himself 2 weeks. It's like all of the rest of the motive stuff kind of makes sense until you add in that he's trying to buy him a couple of weeks that gains him nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like that was my biggest issue with the motive was he's doing this to buy himself a couple of weeks. I mean, obviously the financial crimes aren't going away. The guy's a lawyer. He knows that. Like him killing his it may deflect attention for a minute, but it's certainly not making anything go away. So like that's always just kind of been, and like I always try to put myself in the shoes of the jury. Like every time I'm saying something, like Allison's like, I'm like, well, you're a lawyer. I'm like, you have to think about things like a juror. Like jurors don't care about experts. They don't. Experts X each other out. They're that homespun expert that was up there today who like, Allison, like he was a terrible witness, but I'm like, he was a great witness for the state because he was sweet as pie. He had charm. The jury loved him. They loved the way he talked. He handled Harpootlian's, cross-examination with aplomb. He was even though he didn't really bring much to the table because everything was a guess, I guess, I have an opinion. I heard you. See, she's yelling at me from downstairs.
I love it. I love it.
She could have joined too. We could have had
You could have
4
joined,
of us.
absolutely.
Next time,
That's
it's going to be
right.
all 4.
Next time I'll bring her on for sure.
Okay, well, we're up to 500 people listening to this. So
What?
that's cool.
Oh, cool.
But
That's amazing.
we also, we've kept Bob here for an hour and 15 minutes now. So
I know.
we do need to wrap it up
But
soon.
based
I'm
on
good.
billable hours, I don't think I can afford
Brett,
that.
There you
don't try to end it on my account.
I'm
man.
not.
I'll
I'm
stay on
just
for
saying.
hours.
I'm
dude.
just
No,
wanting people, if they want to vote, now's the time.
Also, we should vote. And also, I think the fact that 500 people are watching and we've been going for almost an hour and a half, and there's still so much more to say, is that, Bob, you have to come back because this trial is nowhere near being finished, I think.
I'm here for it. Definitely. Like let's come back towards the end of the defense's case in chief and see if anything has changed.
Let's come back next week because maybe they'll have rested and we'll see if your mind's been changed.
And absolutely. And of course, once we have a verdict, we'll have to do this. But
Yeah,
I'll just go ahead and give you an update on so right now it's 71% guilty, 4% not guilty, 22% hung jury, and then 3% mistrial because of COVID.
I take issue a little bit with that though, because I'm curious. This is what people think it's going to be. I'm curious what the poll would say is if you were in the jury, how would you vote? Guilty, not guilty, hung, or I got COVID.
Right.
Well, I'll follow up with a poll that says that later. That's a good one.
I'm curious on that because I do think there are people who may be indicating that they think it's going to be a hung jury, but they themselves would vote for guilt. So
right.
I'm just saying, follow up on that. I
mean, it's hard. Like that small town thing is like real, and it's like we just don't. Because I don't know. Did they show any of the voir dire when they were selecting the jury? Did they show any of that? Like in terms of, if they did, I didn't watch it either. So I just don't. And the Garcia, and I know I keep hearkening back to it, but we polled because they had been trying my client in the press for 3 years hard, so I had filed a motion for a change of venue to get it out of Douglas County. Of course it was denied, and we had hired a polling company to poll the citizens of Douglas County to find out, okay, well, have you heard of the case? Yes. Okay. Have you read a lot about the case? Yes. Have you formed an opinion as to innocence or guilt? And it was like 97% had formed an opinion. And then it was like 93% had felt he was guilty. So I'm like, and we went in with that data to the judge. And I'm like, it can't be in this county. We can't impanel a fair jury. And like Brett, you and I were talking about this the last time, man. It's like, no one wants a retrial. No, no one does. No one wants to get it bounced on appeal, but again, we're just talking about a different beast down in South Carolina. I don't know how much sway the Murdaugh family has up on the appellate level. Does it reach the Supreme Court of South Carolina? It's you just don't know. They're a legendary family down there. The guy's sitting in the courtroom with his grandfather's portrait staring at him with great disapproval, through the whole thing, I can't believe you did that to the family, Alec.
No, he's probably thinking, dang it. We kept it under wraps for a century. You let it go. Come on.
They actually took the portrait down. But otherwise, yes. The fact that they had to take a portrait of his grandfather down tells you everything you have to know.
Says a lot.
Right. You just see the old the dust ring around where the portrait.
Well, before we go, let's take one because we are absolutely doing this again. Now we'll just go for a fun poll. When do you think the prosecution is going to rest? And let's plan on getting together that evening for a live.
Awesome.
So what do you think, Bob? What day? Do you think
I'm gonna
into next week?
Yeah, I think tomorrow. Plus I cut it short today. So, and Griffin was saying he's going to go a long time on cross with that cop that was on there, the sled guy. So yeah, I'm going to guess that they end of day Monday is when I think they'll rest.
All right. What do you think, Brett?
Yeah, I think that's the earliest. There's no way they wrap it up
Monday.
tomorrow.
Monday is a court holiday, so Tuesday.
Yeah. So Tuesday.
Oh, it is. That's right. I'm gonna go with middle of the week because everything in this trial is just so slow. There might be another bomb threat.
And I'll say this: one thing about the prosecution is and this is a decision they had to make. They've put on everything. I mean, if that door opened, they took everything through it. So I expect they will put on as much evidence about the roadside thing as they can, even though I think some of the most important points get lost when you spend too much time on these
That's the
sideshows.
fear. That's the fear. They I've been reading in the comments, there's been various people just it's been convoluted in terms of, because they threw everything in. And it's, it's hard. It's like people that haven't tried a case. It's easy to sit back and kind of armchair quarterback and say, well, they screwed that up. When you're in the fight and you have witnesses that have to call off, or I can't make it, there's a best laid plan going into it in terms of strategy. And this is how we think it'll play out the best for the jury. And a lot of times it just doesn't work out that way, because we're human and human things happen and life happens. And witnesses call off, and, there's a lot of different things that happen that cause you to kind of like switch the order of what you otherwise would have called them in. But, kind of like trying to figure out, do you do the financial thing in one big block?
Yes.
Or do you kind of intermittently, but like the fear of that is if you do it in a block that.
I'm sorry, I meant block as in like a summary. Like, don't put on every single darn check.
Oh yeah, no,
That's
I was
what I
talking
meant.
about consecutively, like one witness after another. But then you have the problem of like people forget why you're there. It's like that's kind of the rub. So I don't know, but yeah, I'm gonna guess. I think that they'll wrap it up, because I don't think they're gonna call Cousin Eddie. I just don't. Like, that guy is like,
he's liability.
He's a massive liability. I mean, but he's also the guy that you point to and say, that's who this guy has been hanging out with for 15 years. Like, we're going to show you his phone records, and you know who Alec Murdaugh called and texted more than anybody, more than his wife, more than his sons. It was this guy. And look who this guy is. I mean, they might be able to swing it that way, but like, you don't put him on. He's a turd.
I think you said it best. He's a turd. Well, Bob, seriously, thank you so much for taking so much time.
Pleasure.
You are a fan favorite of our listeners, and you guys, I think most of you are already fans of Defense Diaries, but if you have not heard Bob on Defense Diaries, you have to go give him a listen. We love having you on. We're going to have you on again soon, because this trial is it's gripping and we want to hear more. But before I sign off, Brett, anything else?
Just want to echo Alice. Thank you so much, Bob. It's great to have your perspective. It's really easy for us to get sort of prosecutor tunnel vision sometimes. So thanks for keeping us straight.
And I absolute pleasure. I was super excited when you hit me up. I love to chat. And I'm thrilled that you were here, Alice, because it's like I like having the three of us together, because it really kind of makes it the real family thing there. So I love doing it. Like, I can't wait till we're doing it on the defense side, because I'm going to be asking you all the questions that time. So we'll flip the script and kind of see how, see if they swayed you at all, because I have the same thing. I've got the same issue. I get the tunnel vision from the defense side of it. Allison's worse than me. Like, I'm like, do you ever
She's gonna have to join next time?
Yeah, I'm like, do you ever turn off defense brain? Like, she's like, no, I don't. So I'm like, I guess I'm getting like soft in my old age. I don't know.
I don't think you're soft, but yes, I can't wait till the tables turn and we will be put in the hot seat, and we can't wait for that. And all of you listening live, thank you guys so much. Thank you for following this crazy journey. We're going to keep giving it to you live. And until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this Bob. Is the prosecutor. And who else? And our awesome guest,
Bob.
And this is the prosecutor's legal briefs.
So, that's the prosecution story. And as we've always said, just because the prosecution... Let me back up. Let me start that over. Sorry, I'm starting to sound like Alice.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's catching. Or the bourbon is hitting.
Oh, my goodness.
But you're right. I don't think they played the whole thing. They always play the beginning. All you have to do is watch his interrogation in the car and how he, like, if you didn't, I mean, he's a good actor. Except not really. He's full of himself.